Hello there. What is going on, everyone? Thank you so much for sitting down for this video. Or maybe you're standing up. I'd say sitting down with me because I'm sitting. I'm clearly seated. Hopefully you guys are seated or standing or running, but hopefully not driving or listening while driving, I guess is okay. Don't watch YouTube while driving, but listen to YouTube while driving is just fine. Today we are talking about a very important topic, one that is near and dear to my heart, and it's the most important rule of gaming. I do a lot of gaming here on the channel, and I do a lot of gaming in my personal life and in my professional life, and I am a big fan of making sure it's done right and done well. And through my time gaming, I've kind of come up with what I think is the most important rule, and it's not that you should have fun, although a lot of people tend to say that, well, that's the most important rule. And I challenge that, and I'm going to talk about why in today's video. So if you guys are new here to the channel, I'd love for you to stick around. We talk a lot about Star Wars, a lot about tabletop gaming. While this video isn't specifically tied to Star Wars gaming, I will probably give examples, and we'll talk a little bit about different types of games. Usually I cover miniature wargaming, but I think a lot of this applies to board games and other types of games as well, and possibly even video gaming. So I think these are it's basically a universal principle. So before I try to get too deep into this, I'm gonna just basically jump right into it and let you know that the most important rule of gaming, like I said, it's not that you should have fun, but it's rather that everyone playing should have fun. That also means your opponent. That also means if it's a multiplayer game, everybody should be having a good time. It's not just you, although that is certainly important. But it's that everybody should be having a good time. You want your opponent to have a good time. You want your opponents or your teammates to have a good time too. It's not just a one-person victory show. It's you need people to keep playing, and this is it's not just about being nice or whatever. Granted that being nice is important, and I think that's important to me. But I'm not going to tell you that you should be nice. But I'm going to tell you that you should consider the enjoyment of your opponents, because that's also good for your own enjoyment. For example, if your opponent has a miserable time too many times, they're going to stop becoming your opponent. And sooner or later, if that trend continues, you'll have less and fewer opponents, and eventually the well may dry up. And that's not good for you. That's not good for your opponents. That's not good for me. If the people who are playing the games that we love, play them less and less, we will find ourselves playing only single-player games. And that's not really the heart of gaming. The heart of gaming, I believe, is multiplayer, the multiplayer aspect of gaming, the competitive and cooperative nature of some games, and the teamwork and fellowship and camaraderie that really comes with gaming. And so that's why I say it's not just about you having fun, but about everyone having fun. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that it is your complete and total responsibility to ensure that everybody's having a great time. It's not like you have to be the party planning committee and taking notes and getting everybody refreshments and to that extent. So I'm not saying that it's that far, but I do think it lies the answer, and it lies somewhere in between that and the other extreme, which is I don't care. I'm here only for myself. And I think that this applies not just to casual games, where I think it's more obvious, but I think this also applies to tournament play. I think it's a good principle to apply to tournament play somewhat. And there's definitely some wiggle room in there, but I think while the things that I'm going to talk about, there's things that you can do to kind of help do this without necessarily making you completely responsible for everybody having a great time. But I think it more applies to casual and even semi-competitive play. But I think it's still relative and worth considering when it comes to highly competitive play. Things like, regional, national, world tournaments and things like that. So even if you're, playing at a very, very high level, I don't think that's an excuse to lose your composure or to become sort of a jerk, right? And so again, there's wiggle room, there's a line, but I want to talk about some things that you can do to to help to help deliver a positive experience for everybody involved. And these are going to be kind of generic things, but I want to start talking about things that will happen before a game starts, like the pre-game. And one of the things is to know your opponent and to talk with them, when applicable. A lot of these are going to be situational, but there are times where you're playing a game with somebody you've never met before. And in that case, you probably want to introduce yourself, talk with them, hi, how you doing, so on and so forth. Have you played this game before? Are you new? Get their relative experience, because one time it definitely is more your responsibility to make sure your opponent has a good time is when they're brand new. If you're teaching somebody a new game, I cover a lot of miniature tabletop games, a game like Star Wars Armada or X-Wing or Legion or Star Wars Shatterpoint or Marvel Crisis Protocol. A lot of these games, there's a lot of times when you're playing in a store, you're almost like an ambassador for these games. So that's a time where I think it's more on you to ensure that your opponent has a good time if you're teaching them a game. Now, when it comes to that, a big part of that is usually, I would say, let them win. But it doesn't have to be, but generally it's a good idea if somebody wins their first time playing against you, because then they're more likely to walk away with a positive experience. And usually, when you're teaching somebody a game, not always, because it depends on maybe your friends, if you have a very competitive friend or whatever. So again, know the person as best you can, get to understand what they want out of the game. But usually if they're brand new, I definitely suggest letting them win, or at least making it very, very close. But nobody has a good mostly nobody has a good experience when their first time being introduced to a game, they get curb stomped by a meta heavy super crusher list, and then they can't do anything. Imagine if you ever played Magic the Gathering, imagine somebody's teaching you Magic the Gathering, and on the first turn they play a Channel Fireball combination and kill you, and you're like, well, you lost, try not losing next time, get good, son. That's a terrible mentality to take in most gaming, but especially against a new player. So if they're not a new player, there's definitely certain other things that you can talk about and kind of suggestions I have. And one thing that kind of leads into a sponsored bit here is to have, if you have cool tokens, definitely use your great, awesome tokens. That's going to help make the gaming experience better for everybody. So I want to thank A Luxury Playstyle for sponsoring this video today. Amazing full metal tokens compatible with lots of tabletop games like Star Wars Legion and Star Wars X-Wing and, Magic the Gathering, tons. Head over to luxuryplaystyle.com. Use code Crabbok VIP. You're going to save 15% off of your order. Absolutely amazing stuff. You're also going to get a free lightsaber nunchuck Crabbok token on any order over $35 that uses that code. So check them out. They make amazing gifts, and that's a great way to make sure your opponent's having a great time by giving them the gift of luxury playstyle tokens, or keeping them for yourself. And maybe you just let them look at them and see how shiny and beautiful they are. Right. But no, we're going to talk some more about some things pre-game as far as, that can help make sure that everybody's having a good time without it being your total responsibility. But talk about what you each want to accomplish. Talk with your opponent. Make sure that your goals align with their goals. It's such a simple thing, although it sounds like it's very philosophical. But just talk about hey, we're just gonna play a casual game. Do you want to try out a new list? Hey, there's new expansions just came out. Do we want to both try stuff from the new? Or do we want to try tournament practice lists? Do you want to try and go real hardcore? Do we want to go really serious? What level do we want to play at? Do you want to play at a high competitive level, mid-level, kind of maybe a little jank that still could win in a tournament, or do you just want to do something thematic? And to do something like that. And if it's a game like Magic the Gathering, or a game like Star Wars Legion or Star Wars X-Wing or Armada or something like that, bring a deck or a list or an army, or if it's Warhammer or whatever, bring an army that fits your discussion, what you guys both want to get out of the game. If your opponent just says, I just want to play casual, I haven't played in a year, and I just want to kind of dip my toes back in the water, then it's probably a good idea to bring kind of a low to mid-level list that will not crush them and say, oh man, yeah, that's a good thing I haven't played in a year. This was why I didn't want to play, because I was going to get, completely crushed right away. So you don't want that. You don't want to beat them round one, right? Unless of course they're very competitive. And again, know your opponent, talk with them beforehand. But also ask yourself about your goals. What is it that you want to accomplish out of a game? Now, maybe it's because this can help you build some sort of achievements. Because I think you should also ask both, not only your own goals, but your opponent's goals, and ask yourself how you're going to feel if you lose. Are you being extremely competitive about this, or is it a game that you can play and lose and still have a good time? That's definitely an important thing, and I think that kind of applies to both players. And so those are some of my favorite games, are games that you can lose and still say, whew, that was awesome. I had a wonderful time. And, it's one of my favorite games of all time, Twilight Imperium, 4th edition. I have never won that game. Not once. Still my favorite game, because I always have a great time when I play it. So, again, talk with people, and try not to be a jerk also, which kind of takes us into during the game. So if you did pregame and you kind of establish some goals for what you want to accomplish, and this could be something as simple as, I'm playing Twilight Imperium, I want to build War Suns, I want to try to build the Death Star in this game. Even if I lose, maybe I get to build the Death Star. It might be an achievement unlocked for you, right? Sort of gaming achievements. I have talked about this before. I feel like gaming achievements are like micro wins within the game. So even if you don't win, maybe you get your achievement. Maybe you did something really cool. You did something that you never thought you'd be able to do. Maybe you're playing Magic the Gathering, you want to play Wrath of God, and you want to destroy 5 or more creatures with one spell or something like that. You can make it happen. Maybe I'm dating myself. I don't even know if people play Wrath of God anymore. It was a really strong card back decades ago when I used to play Magic the Gathering. But my point is, like, if you have goals, if you have certain things, maybe it's synergy within your list. If you're bringing a fleet or an army, hey, I have these 3 different units and they all kind of work. This guy feeds tokens to this guy, and this guy then turns those tokens into extra damage for this guy, but it's hard to make it all work. Maybe you get that perfect shot or that great moment within a game. These are things that you can try to accomplish mid-game, that even if you lose, maybe your list did what it was supposed to do. And that's always a fun thing, because that also, even if you're a competitive player, if your list is able to do what it's supposed to do, but you still lost, you can say, okay, well, so the tech in the build is working. What else can I improve on to make sure that the whole thing is more successful? And those are great ways to kind of keep a healthy attitude, even if the game doesn't go in a direction that you were planning on it going. But also, I'd say just maintain a healthy attitude during the game with other things. Like, for example, some people smack talk or trash talk, and usually that's something I would try to suggest you avoid. Again, and unless, of course, maybe it's an old friend of yours and you're very familiar players, and that's just the known mentality, and you're playing in, like, maybe somebody's home or something like that. But, you kind of want to, I would suggest kind of limiting your amount of trash talk, just, especially, if there's people that you haven't played against before that are in the game, or maybe you're playing in a common space and there's people nearby, so, like, again, try not to be a jerk. Consider other people, and do that during the game. Be aware of your opponent during the game. Little things like body language or facial expressions, and this one's not as easy for a lot of people to do, but try to be aware if they're having a good time or not, or if they're having a bad time. Talk to them. You can, if you want to be nice, you can compliment them on maybe making a good play in the game. It's like, you got my guy there. You did really good. I wasn't expecting you to make that play, but things like that can actually really make a big difference, especially if somebody's losing, but they have a good move or a really good round for them. It can kind of keep spirits up, and it also lets them know that you're being a good sport. That you're interested in, that you're a human being and you care about them as a human being as well. Because sometimes it can feel kind of bad to lose a game, especially if you're still learning, especially if you're a newer player. I'd also say follow the rules. This one sounds very simple, but I gotta include it. Basically, don't cheat. And try to, if you're playing against, maybe if you're going to like a tournament or something like that, try to brush up on the rules. It's try to make sure you don't get the rules glaringly wrong, because that is one thing that's too often causes people to get into disagreements and get kind of nasty with each other, as arguments over rules, and then judges get called and you're like, no, you can't do that. Yes, you can, and so on and so forth. it's one we can try to avoid. We can try to at least minimize that by staying up to date on the rules as often as we can, and also kind of not digging in your feet that you know everything. Oh no, I know this is the way, because you might be wrong. It's happened to me multiple times where I was sure I was right about something and I was dead wrong. So try to be a little humble when it comes to those types of rulings as well. And if your opponent is wrong, try not to rub their nose in it. I want to thank everybody who has played me. If you're watching this and I've ever played a game against you and I was wrong and you took the high ground like Obi-Wan and you didn't rub my nose in it, I want to thank you so much, because I have been wrong more times than I care to admit. And there were a few times where I kind of almost dug my heels in a little bit. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. And those moments haunt me to this day. So again, try to be cool with people about stuff like that. And look them up, have them look. I can show your work, like, no, it actually says right here, and this is the latest FAQ from the developer or something like that. If it's a board game, sometimes there's Board Game Geek FAQs and things like that. But so try not to get too heated about the rules, but do your best to be following the rules. Or this also goes for like agreed upon rules or homebrew rules. Like, let's say everybody, hey, we're all going to play thematic lists from Return of the Jedi. Don't come in with something from Rogue One, because that would kind of break the agreed upon rules, right? So things like that. And this other one is an interesting one. I want to say be respectful of the game components as well as where you're playing. This works for both, but it's a little bit more common for board games where one person brings the board game and kind of owns all of the pieces. I've seen it before where some people will lick their, or like have fingers in their mouth or whatever, and then touching the pieces and stuff like that. Like, don't do that. Like, try to be clean. Try to wash your hands and try to practice hygiene and also like not putting your spit on things and stuff like that. But or sometimes you're gaming in a place where there's food being consumed. Make sure whoever, ask the person who owns the game how they feel about stuff before you just take a slice of pizza and you got grease all over your hands and you're touching their cards and some people, I've seen people do that. It's generally, and if you're new to board gaming, generally you want to try to keep the other person's components for their game as clean as possible. But this also applies to miniature wargaming. When you're moving pieces around, try to be careful of your own stuff, of course, but also the other players' components are on the table. Sometimes you're playing with terrain. It's probably not your terrain, so be careful with that. Try not to just drop things, or don't roll your dice haphazardly. Can I even say that word? Haphazardly, haphazardly, or full hazardly, or double hazardly across the table and knock things over and things like that. Try not to be too clumsy like Jar Jar Binks as much as you can. And if your opponent is being a little clumsy, keep in mind they could just be nervous. I remember my first time, or my first couple of games playing in a store, or my first tournament. Heck, my first 2 or 3 tournaments, I remember being so nervous I used to shake. My hands would shake, and I'd be going to roll dice, and not what you're thinking. Nah, I see you. I got you. All right. Yeah, you. Yeah, the one who just said no, he doesn't mean me. Yes, that's the one. Anyway, and of course, there's some post-game tips as well. Typically, although it's it's slightly optional, is to shake hands after a game. You don't necessarily have to shake hands, fist bump, or some kind of verbal or Wakanda salute or something like that. But to congratulate each other on a game, thank your opponent for playing, and do it in a sincere way, because when people game together, everybody should be having a great time. It keeps our endorphins up and keeps us happy and keeps our brains stimulated. And your opponents help make that possible for you. If there were no opponents, gaming would be dead. So yes, definitely congratulate each other. I encourage you to talk about the game with your opponent. Talk about what went right, what went wrong. You can comment on their list. Hey, you know what? I really like that you did this and that. Maybe next time, have you thought about doing this? Because I think that would make a difference. And maybe they might have some feedback for your list. You might get some insight into something you hadn't considered before. But it's always a nice thing. I've always loved hearing after a gut-wrenching loss that my opponent was like, hey, you had me on the ropes there for a minute, things like that. It kind of helps to salvage the ego a little bit. And if you can do that for your opponent, that's going to go a long way towards having repeat opponents and towards just building community. And I think that that's an important thing. And the last thing I want to talk about is to help clean up. This is, I think, just basic human decency, but it applies at different stages and at different levels. So for mini wargaming, obviously you both kind of touch each other. You try not to touch each other's stuff any more than you absolutely have to, and you usually always ask permission before you touch somebody else's stuff. But if it's the end of the day, if you pulled out terrain, you should put the terrain away. Respect the store in which you're playing in, and and clean up. And clean up after yourself. Not only just getting your own components put away and your tokens put away and those shiny luxury playstyle tokens put away very nice and neat. So, but also if you brought food with you, right? If you don't leave a can of soda on the gaming table and things like that. Like, respect the place and the people who are going to play there after you, and the store, because maybe some clerk who isn't getting paid enough is going to have to come clean up your mess afterwards, right? So always respect the place, but also it's a big deal in board games to help clean up. If it's somebody else's game, I've seen too many times where, like, maybe a 4 or 5 person game, people just kind of get up as soon as it's over and leave. And if the minimum is to offer to help clean up at least your own components. Like, hey, if you're the yellow player and you have all the yellow game components, try to gather those up and see if they were put in a baggie initially, and ask the owner what they would like for you to do. At least offer. To at least clean up your own components, but then you can also offer to clean up additional components. It could be some owners of board games will just say, no, I've got everything. Don't worry about it. But they'll still appreciate you offering. Me, on the other hand, I definitely appreciate people at least kind of getting their own components together. It makes it a lot easier for me to put things away. And usually I'll handle putting everything back in the box. But if as much as you can organize and sort of, especially for bigger games that have larger player counts, cleaning up is a big deal. Making sure that cards are all kind of in the right piles, and maybe, if it's a deck builder, you get all the starter cards separated from all the extra cards and things like that. Just great ways to help build communities and be a great human to other humans who game, and ensure that these games and your next games are going to continue to be fun for everybody involved. And that is the most important rule in gaming. Make sure everybody's having a good time, and you'll have a good time too. So it's definitely circular. It all works together. All right, guys, let me know your thoughts. I'd love to have you stick around. Click that subscribe button. You can jump in our Discord and talk more about gaming and share photos and all kinds of cool stuff like that. Talk about list ideas, talk about your favorite games, and talk about Star Wars stuff in general, or other sci-fi stuff, or Star Trek, which is also super cool. And I wish there were more Star Trek games than we have already. So hopefully we'll get some new Star Trek games. Hopefully, wink, wink to everybody that's out there. I definitely want more Star Trek games. But all right, we'll talk to you guys later. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are out of this world and help make this channel possible. I will talk to you later. May the force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. The spice must flow. And have a great day.